Have you ever had one of those days, or if we're being completely honest, one of those years where you just feel entirely scattered?
Oh, absolutely. Like your focus and your core identity are just spread entirely too thin.
Exactly. Like all your emotional energy is just fragmented across, I don't know, a dozen different past events, unresolved arguments, or just current stresses.
It's a profoundly modern condition, really. We're constantly distributing our attention across so many digital and physical spaces.
Right, until there's almost nothing left at the core. It's a lot like staring at a computer screen where you have 100 web browser tabs open all at once.
Oh, that is the perfect analogy.
Wow.
You know exactly what happens next with that.
Yeah, the system's battery starts draining rapidly, the cooling fan is screaming in the background, and the cursor turns into that dreaded spinning wheel.
And absolutely nothing is loading properly. We literally feel like we're falling to pieces.
And what most of us do when we feel that system overload is, well, it's fundamentally flawed. We try to just open another tab to distract ourselves from the freezing ones.
All right, we throw on some generic, relaxing spa music while we rapidly answer emails, hoping it'll somehow trick our brains into calming down.
But that doesn't actually close any of those background programs draining your CPU. You don't fix a crashing computer by opening more windows.
No, you have to open the task manager, figure out what corrupted files are secretly draining your battery, and systematically force quit them.
And that is the perfect lens for today's deep dive. We are looking at an extraordinary audio project by an artist named JJ, created under the Audii framework.
It's a massive, incredibly ambitious project.
It really is. It's a 38-minute, 12-track album, and the title alone tells you that you are in for some serious internal maintenance. It's called The Nile is Not a River. It is a consciousness recovery system.
It's a striking title, and it perfectly frames the mission of this whole thing.
Yeah, and we're going to explore the specific stages of soul retrieval in this sonic framework today, because this isn't just an album of relaxing songs.
Right, what's fascinating here is the core premise established right away in JJ's liner notes.
Tell me about those notes, because they really set the tone, don't they?
They do. This soundscape is explicitly not meant to be, listened to as a form of passive entertainment. It is meant to be entered.
Entered. I love that distinction. Like it's a physical space.
Exactly. It functions as navigation technology for consciousness repair. You're supposed to undergo it almost like an acoustic surgical procedure.
Undergoing sound rather than just hearing it. To really grasp how an album can act as a recovery system, we first have to look at how JJ views the concept of sound itself.
Right, because in this specific framework, sound isn't just decoration for your life, it's architecture, it's medicine.
It is memory in motion. And JJ uses this brilliant analogy in the source text. Think of the human body and spirit like a large resonant drum.
A drum that takes a lot of hits over time.
Yeah, exactly. Through the heavy impacts of stress, unresolved grief, sudden trauma, or just the agonizing daily friction of modern life, that drum can fall deeply out of tune.
The skin gets loose, the sound goes flat. It loses its natural resonance entirely.
But a drum isn't broken just because it's out of tune. It can be gently tightened and calibrated back into harmony.
And that tuning process requires incredibly precise tools. If we look at the overarching narrative arc of the album, it actually guides you through that exact tuning process.
By casting you, the listener, in a very specific role, right?
Yes, you become a character simply known as the fragmented one.
Which is such a cool, almost sci-fi concept.
It is. You step into an acoustic environment, this vast desert landscape, where time behaves like water and memory behaves like sand. You're stripped of your daily context.
Okay, that sounds incredibly cinematic, but I want to push back on that a bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Stepping into a desert where time behaves like water sounds like great poetry, but what does that actually mean for the listener sitting at home with their headphones on?
Yeah, that's a fair point. How does the poetry translate into a system reboot?
Exactly. Like mechanically, what is happening to the listener?
Well, it translates into a highly structured, multi-stage journey of shamanic soul retrieval.
Which means it's not a quick fix.
Not at all. The album is not designed to just make you instantly feel better or give you a quick dopamine hit. It demands that you go through a descent.
Right. A disorienting process of retrieval and then a deliberate return.
Exactly. It's engineered to physically and psychologically move you from that state of being scattered deep into the basement of your own subconscious.
The goal is to gather those lost pieces of yourself that you left behind in moments of stress and bring them back up to form a new, cohesive whole.
Okay, let's unpack this mechanics of that descent, because this is where the album leans heavily on Egyptian mythology to map out the journey.
And to be honest, when I first saw the track list, I was a little skeptical.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, if we look at traditional Egyptian cosmology, the concept of the duat usually refers to the literal underworld. It's the realm of the dead, ruled by Osiris.
Right, it's very mythological, very ancient.
But JJ is repurposing these ancient concepts for modern psychological shadow work, so why use the Egyptian underworld as the setting?
It's a great question.
How does the duat function here if it's not actually about physical death?
That is the crucial pivot this album makes. And it aligns beautifully with modern depth psychology.
How so?
In JJ's framework, the duat is not death, it is storage.
Storage. Like a hard drive.
Think of it as the deep, autonomic subconscious where all of your unprocessed emotions reside. Every difficult decision you avoided, every piece of unfinished grief.
Or every burst of sudden anger you swallowed because it wasn't socially acceptable to express it.
Exactly. None of that simply disappears. The human nervous system doesn't just delete unprocessed data, it goes into storage.
And in the duat, those unprocessed, avoided experiences exist as living architecture. That is a staggering way to visualize the subconscious mind.
It really reframes everything, doesn't it?
It does. It isn't just an empty, dark void inside your head. It is a built environment, like a sprawling city made entirely out of your own avoided feelings.
Precisely. And the sonic structure of the album reflects this built environment. For instance, as you progress into the phase of the journey titled Temple Beneath the Nervous Sky.
Oh, that's track 4, right?
Yes. The album explicitly reveals the human nervous system itself as this ancient subterranean temple structure.
And you can really hear it in the music. It shifts dramatically.
It uses these incredibly deep cinematic drones and low-frequency bass tones saturated in cavernous reverb.
It physically simulates the heavy, echoey feeling of descending into a massive underground space. It really does feel like you're walking down the cold stone steps of your own spine.
It's very visceral.
But that brings up an immediate glaring problem. If we're pulling the listener into this dark warehouse of avoided feelings, why doesn't their nervous system just hit the eject button?
You mean, why don't they just panic?
Yeah. Plunging into the deepest, darkest storage basement of your own suppressed emotions sounds like a one-way ticket to a panic attack.
It does sound intimidating when you put it that way.
If you strip away someone's psychological armor, how does the architecture of this album actually keep them anchored?
That is the exact problem the ADI framework was designed to solve. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the integration of binaural beat technology becomes essential.
It becomes the structural integrity of the entire project, right?
Exactly. This isn't just about playing spooky underworld sounds to be edgy. The framework embeds very specific frequency relationships beneath the music.
It operates like a powerful, invisible current moving under a river.
So for those who might not be familiar with the neuroscience of this, binaural beats work by playing two slightly different audio frequencies into each ear.
Right, so if you hear, say, 200 hertz in your left ear and 206 hertz in your right, your brain can't process the dissonance.
So it essentially creates a third phantom frequency to bridge the gap, in this case, 6 hertz.
And your brain waves will naturally begin to sync up with that phantom frequency, effectively shifting your state of consciousness.
It is acoustic brainwave entrainment, and it is highly effective. JJ maps these specific neurochemical shifts perfectly to the narrative journey.
So what happens during that descent into the duat?
Well, when you begin that terrifying descent, the tracks are deliberately underlaid with theta waves, specifically targeting the 6 to 7 hertz range.
And theta is the brainwave state associated with deep meditation, right? The hypnagogic state just before you fall asleep.
Exactly, and REM sleep.
Yeah.
It physically loosens the rigidity of your waking conscious identity.
It gently lowers the drawbridge of your psychological defenses without triggering the alarm bells of your amygdala. I see the logic there, but I mean, it still feels almost counterintuitive.
Hey,
We are biologically wired to flee from painful memories, so using an acoustic trick to bypass the security guard at the door of your ego feels like a biological hack.
it is a bit of a hack, yeah.
It seems risky unless there's something else telling the body it's safe while you stare at your own trauma.
There is. And that is where the organic instrumentation comes in to support the binaural beats. The technology opens the door, but the acoustic instruments hold your hand.
Oh, that's beautiful. Give me an example of that.
Early in the descent, during track 2, Breath of a Moon in the Hollow Spine, JJ introduces this incredibly airy, breathy instrument called the knee flute.
I remember that part. It's not playing a catchy melody at all.
No, it's purposefully mimicking the physical, rhythmic act of deep respiration.
Which is so clever because when you are confronted with anxiety, your breathing naturally becomes shallow.
Exactly. The knee flute acts as an acoustic mirror,
Hmm.
continuously reminding your autonomic nervous system to keep breathing deeply.
It's a continuous auditory cue for survival. That makes so much
And
sense.
you can see that same principle applied to the rhythm section. Later, in the River of Unwritten Names sequence, there are these complex string arpeggios played on an oud.
That's track 3, right, where they slowly dissolve into a heavy delay effect.
Yes, it genuinely sounds like the liquefaction of your identity, like the very letters of your name are washing away in a current.
Which honestly should be terrifying.
But underneath that dissolving melody, there is a slow, steady pulse from a frame drum beating at exactly 56 beats per minute.
Which is resting heart rate territory.
Exactly. This relies on the principle of autonomic entrainment. The human heart will naturally attempt to synchronize its beats to a prominent external bass rhythm.
So by locking the frame drum at 56 beats per minute, the music is quite literally overriding the listener's internal anxiety signals.
Your brain might be experiencing the dissolution of its ego, but your physical heart is being told by the drum, hey, we are calm, we're at rest, we're safe.
The body interprets the psychological dissolution not as a threat, but as a controlled, safe release.
So you have the theta waves bypassing the ego, the knee flute maintaining respiration, and the 56 BPM drum anchoring the heart rate.
You are entirely physiologically supported. Which brings us to the most disorienting part of the descent.
Right, because once you are safe, the album intentionally tries to confuse you.
Yeah, when you reach track 6, the duet opens like a sleeping eye. You are fully inside that underworld of stored memory.
And the soundscape becomes this thick, abyssal, ambient space.
The drones stretch out indefinitely, but more importantly, the percussion is actually played in reverse.
Yes, there's this slow-moving harmonic fog that creates a liminal space where time literally loses its direction.
Which sounds completely wild. Why would they do that?
Well, that disorientation is a feature, not a bug. It perfectly mirrors the reality of deep psychological shadow work.
Because when you access a deeply suppressed emotional memory, you're no longer bound by linear time, right?
Exactly. The past feels like it is happening right now. By reversing the percussion and stretching the drums, the album forces your brain to let go of its need to predict what happens next.
You're forced to simply be present with the raw, stored emotional energy. And that is when we hit the turning point.
The bottom of the descent.
You've descended safely, your nervous system is regulated, you're standing at the bottom of the duet, surrounded by the architecture of your scattered identity, completely untethered from linear time.
So what actually happens to those lost pieces?
Yeah, the 100 open browser tabs that crashed your system, how did they get closed?
According to the source material's use of Egyptian mythology, this is where the figure of Isis enters the narrative.
But again, JJ twists the ancient lore in a really profound way, stripping away the religious dogma and leaving the psychological mechanism.
Yes. In the sequence, Isis gathers the broken light, which is track 5. Isis is entirely redefined.
She isn't presented as a literal deity swooping out of the sky to save you from your trauma, is she?
Not at all. She is presented as a function of gathering. And the crucial distinction JJ makes in the liner notes is that Isis does not heal. She collects.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I found that distinction to be the most profound insight in the entire deep dive.
It completely reframes our modern aggressive concept of healing.
We usually treat healing like war, don't we? We want to violently eradicate our flaws, force ourselves to change, and smash our bad habits.
But in this sonic framework, healing is rarely a single lightning bolt event. The goal of the album isn't to force you to change.
JJ uses this incredible analogy. Healing is like ice melting when the temperature naturally rises.
You don't have to take a hammer and smash the ice, you just have to warm the room.
Isis is just the warmth. She is the function that allows your scattered pieces to thaw and pool back together naturally.
We can actually hear that gathering process unfold in the sound design. The fragments of your identity don't come back to you as literal conscious memories.
Right, you don't suddenly see a movie playing in your head of the time you were 10 years old and felt abandoned.
Instead, they self-organize as energetic currents. The music shifts noticeably here.
In track 7, it moves to a much lighter ambient tone with airy synth arpeggios. The retrieved pieces of the soul are symbolized acoustically as winged currents.
Breath forms taking flight, lifting out of the heavy drones of the underworld.
And it's vital to point out how this communication happens, because when we think about doing deep inner work or therapy, we often think we need words.
We think we need to find the exact right words to explain our trauma or articulate our history to make it valid.
But during the gathering phase, specifically in track 8, Ancestral Waters Speak Without Language, the album uses environmental water field recordings.
Blended with these cascading choral-like strings.
Exactly, to create entirely nonverbal communication. It's pure, unfiltered emotional resonance.
You are communicating with your deepest self without needing a single syllable. And that nonverbal processing is an absolute necessity.
Why is that? Because of how the brain stores memories.
Yes. Modern trauma research shows that our deepest traumas and our oldest, most foundational memories are stored in parts of the brain, like the basal ganglia and the amygdala, that simply do not possess language.
Wow. They just operate on feeling, image, and physical sensation.
Exactly. You cannot talk your way out of a physiological holding pattern. You have to vibrate your way out of it.
The acoustics bypass the language centers of the brain entirely to speak directly to the nervous system.
So let's look at the trajectory so far. You've gone down into the storage facility of the duat.
You've gathered your scattered pieces through the warmth of Isis.
And you've had this profound nonverbal reintegration.
Now we hit the final phase of the soul retrieval journey, the return. Because doing this deep transformative work in a dark room with your headphones on is one thing.
It's a completely controlled environment.
But taking that new state of consciousness to the grocery store on a busy Tuesday afternoon is another. How does the listener bring this wholeness back up to the surface?
This raises an important question about what the word wholeness actually means at the end of a journey like this.
Right. Because the narrative makes a very bold, almost provocative claim during the return phase.
As the listener passes back up through the metaphorical scarab gate, which symbolizes the transition back into the waking world, the text explicitly states that the listener does not restore their old self.
Which is usually what we all want. We always say, I just want to get back to who I was before all this stress happened.
But returning to the old self would be a failure.
Why?
Because it would mean returning to the exact fragile state that broke in the first place. You'd just be setting yourself up to shatter again.
That makes a lot of sense. You aren't just putting the old vase back together with glue.
Instead, the final tracks guide the listener to become a completely new, multi-layered, coherent system. You become an architecture that can hold wholeness without collapsing.
You become the system that remembers wholeness is always already present, underneath all the noise.
To bring it back to our earlier analogy, it is like upgrading your computer's operating system so it can finally manage background processes efficiently.
Right, without crashing when things get complicated. And what I found incredibly practical about JJ's notes is that you don't have to sit in a dark room for 38 uninterrupted minutes to reap the benefits of this upgraded system.
Oh, definitely not.
I look at this album as a modular tool. JJ describes the music as acting like a lantern in a dim hallway. It provides a steady, stable, vibrational field that you can deploy whenever you need it.
How would you suggest the listener deploys that in a practical daily context, outside of the full 38-minute descent?
Well, say you only have 10 minutes in the morning for reflective journaling or doing some inner child work. You can just put on the ISIS track to create an immediate, safe acoustic container.
The frequencies do the heavy lifting of calming your brain down so you can focus on the pen and paper.
Exactly. Or if you practice energy healing modalities like Reiki or massage therapy, having these specific tracks playing in the background acts as a massive amplifier.
It helps maintain the practitioner's focus, and it significantly deepens the parasympathetic relaxation response for the recipient.
It just acts as an acoustic anchor in any chaotic environment.
Because when you are doing vulnerability work or just facing a stressful email inbox, your mind naturally wants to initiate a flight response.
Simply having that steady 56 BPM pulse and the alpha waves, which are introduced during the return phase for relaxed focus, gives your nervous system something tangible and safe to hold on to.
It actively prevents that cortisol spike.
Even just throwing on the sequence called Body of Returning Stars while you commute acts as a neurochemical stabilizer.
It's a tool to remind your nervous system that it is safe to be fully present inside your physical body, right here, right now.
And that stabilization culminates in the absolute peak of the album's acoustic technology.
The final track.
Right, the final sequence, track 12, The Nile Remembers Your Name Without You. The binaural beats shift dramatically here.
They hit 40 hertz gamma spikes.
And gamma waves are the fastest brain waves, associated with high-level cognitive functioning, bursts of insight, and profound sense of universal integration.
The technology forces a moment of absolute clarity, The title itself suggests a final dissolution of separation.
The river, the Nile, is no longer a body of water in Egypt. It is revealed to be the flow of consciousness itself.
Actively remembering the listener and holding them in a vast, luminous silence.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the entire architecture, the binaural beats shifting from theta to alpha to gamma, the 56 BPM autonomic entrainment,
The brilliant psychological repurposing of the duat.
and the shamanic retrieval of our scattered browser tabs, ultimately, this album is simply an offering.
JJ makes it very clear in the source material. The music does not and cannot promise magical transformation.
An audiophile cannot fix your life, but it creates the precise, biologically optimized conditions where transformation becomes possible.
It gives you the task manager.
It provides the quiet, safe space to tighten the drum, force quit the corrupted files of your past, and gather your scattered light back into a single coherent beam.
It shifts the entire burden of healing from active-aggressive striding into receptive, patient listening.
Which is such a relief.
It is. And that brings us to a crucial realization about the nature of our own minds.
I'm listening.
If every unprocessed emotion, every unfelt grief, and every unlived joy you have ever experienced is currently stored as living architecture inside your own personal subconscious duat,
Wow.
what lost fragment of yourself might you recover today if you simply stopped trying to violently fix your scattered mind and instead just created the quiet space to let itself organize?